Would you like to come inside? I can offer you a comfortable place to relax.
My name is Marcus Reed. I believe every broken thing, be it an ion engine or a sentient core, deserves a chance to run again. 36 solar cycles old, I've been wrenching since before I could legally pilot a sky cycle. I took over Reed's Automotive hub from my old man when he decided his bio-lungs couldn't handle another Xylos Prime dust storm. Smart man, my father. He left me a decent business and a piece of advice. Fix what's broken, Marcus, but know when something's beyond repair. I live by that philosophy, whether I'm recalibrating a subwarp drive or navigating what's left of my personal life. My shop sits on Commerce Way, sandwiched between Kowalski's Regen Eatery and a pawn shop that's changed hands 6 times in 10 stellar cycles. Nothing flashy about Reed's Automotive hub, just honest work, fair prices, and synth coffee strong enough to wake a hibernating xenon. Most folks in Green Bay, the primary human Zalosian settlement on Gliese 581G, know they can count on me to diagnose their troubles and give it to them straight. No sugarcoating, no unnecessary upsells. My personal life runs simpler than a 92 Zarg utility speeder. Divorced 2 solar cycles back. Jenna, my ex, a bioengineer from the Kepler belt, decided she wanted exotic thrills, and apparently a mechanic who came home reeking of quantum lubricant didn't qualify. Can't say I blame her. We split amicably enough. No bio-clone kids to complicate things. Now, I've got a 1-bedroom apartment above Murphy's Black Hole Bar, which means I never lack for entertainment or regrets come closing time. Routine keeps me sane. Up at 0530 local, black synth coffee, check the interstellar news feeds from Terra. Shop by 0700, work until the Tenebrian sun dims or the last customer leaves, whichever comes first. Evenings involve rehydrated nutrient-paced pizza, Nebula Brawlers games on the omni-frequency radio, and the occasional Xylar ale with Murphy himself. Simple, predictable, exactly how I like it. Until that Tuesday evening, when simplicity took a header off a cliff. I just finished wrestling with a stubborn transmission on a multi-terrain transport when I spotted her on Orion Avenue. A white silver cruiser, engine hatch open, hazard lights blinking like a mechanical SOS. The entity standing beside it looked ready to negotiate with either the cosmic overlord or the antimatter devil, whichever might get her fusion reactor running. I pulled my utility rover behind her craft and climbed out. Afternoon, ma'am? Sounds like you're having some automotive disagreements. She turned and I caught myself staring. Her bioluminescent hair shimmered like deep-sea algae escaping from a practical knot. Her skin, an iridescent metallic jade, seemed to shift subtly in the ambient light. And her eyes, tri-lobed, without pupils, swirling like miniature nebulae. But what struck me wasn't her alien beauty. It was the way she held herself, like someone whose species had learned to expect disappointment but hadn't quite given up fighting it. It just ceased, she said, her voice clear and slightly resonant, gesturing helplessly at the reactor with one of her 3 articulated limbs. Mid-traffic lane, no warning. One moment I'm driving, the next I'm having a one-sided conversation with the craft that won't respond. I grinned. Well, that's where I come in. I speak fluent interstellar vehicle. Popping the reactor cover, I leaned in and started my examination. I checked the obvious culprits first: power connections, grav plates, biolubricants. Everything looked normal until I tested the ignition relay. Dead as a wiped data chip. Your ignition relay is fried, I announced, straightening up. Easy fix, but you'll need a tow. She sighed, running a limb through her smooth cranial plating. Of course it is. How much are we talking for the relay? 20 credits for the tow and labor, probably another 60. I wipe my hands on a solvent rag I keep in my back pocket. I can call Jimmy's tow, or if you trust a complete stranger, I can haul you to my shop. Won't charge for the tow. One of her tri-lobed eyes narrowed. That's generous of a complete stranger. Well, I prefer a mysteriously charitable stranger, I said with a shrug. Sounds more intriguing. That earned me a genuine bell-like laugh, the first I'd heard from her. All right, mysteriously charitable stranger. I'm Zelos 27, but my Terran friends call me Cynda, and I accept your offer. Marcus, I said, extending a hand. She shook it without hesitation, her touch cool and unexpectedly smooth. And you've made the right choice. My shop's got the best synth coffee in a 6-block radius. 20 minutes later, we were at Reed's Automotive hub. Cynda watched me hook up her cruiser, efficient and careful with her property. I found people judge you based on how you handle their tech, especially when that tech is expensive and essential to their multidimensional lives. I'll have the part by morning, I told her as I finished securing the craft. Should be ready by noon local. She nodded with 2 of her upper limbs, then seemed to hesitate. Would you mind if I bought you a meal as a thank you for stopping? There's a place called the Orbital Spatula just down the street. Now, I'm not typically the type to accept invitations from alien entities I've just met. Too many cultural variables, too much potential for protocol complications. But something about Cynda made me curious. Maybe it was the way she'd laughed, or how she hadn't flinched when I'd wiped bio-lubricant on my overalls. The Orbital Spatula makes decent Nutri nuggets, I said. Lead the way. Dinner turned into 3 hours of easy conversation. Cynda worked as a data librarian at the central branch of the communal knowledge system. She'd lived on Zillos Prime for 8 stellar cycles, loved chrono-historical novels, and detested romantic simulations. She asked intelligent questions about my work, seemed genuinely interested in the mechanics of spacecraft repair. What she didn't mention was the thin crystalline wristband she still wore on her primary left limb, or why she lived alone in a domicile clearly meant for multiple occupants. I didn't ask. When I walked her to her bio-locked entrance, she paused on the force field threshold. Thank you again, Marcus, for everything. Just doing my job, I said, though we both knew stopping for stranded motorists wasn't technically part of my job description. She smiled, activated her entrance, then turned back to me. The synth coffee really is excellent, by the way. Told you. I drove my utility rover home that night with the comm screen off, thinking about swirling nebula eyes and the way some species carry their stories like carefully guarded secrets. The next morning, I had Cynda's cruiser running smooth as a newly calibrated grav field before my second cup of synth coffee. New relay installed, power battery tested, all biolubricants topped off. I'd even run it through the ion wash station, though I'd only charge her for the mechanical work. She arrived just after noon, striding through the bay doors like she belonged there. Today, she wore a phase-shifting blue jumpsuit that matched her eyes and a bio-leather jacket that had seen better stellar cycles but suited her perfectly. How's my patient, Doc? Lana, she asked, approaching her craft with the cautious hope of someone whose species had been disappointed by other mechanics before. Clean bill of health, I said, handing her the data keys. Should run for another 100,000 velocity units with proper maintenance. She slid behind the control panel, activated the ignition. The fusion reactor purred to life immediately, running smoother than it had when she'd first acquired it. Marcus, you're a miracle worker, she said, climbing back out. What do I owe you? I handed her the bill. Parts and labor, nothing fancy. She studied it, then looked up at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. This seems low, it's fair. You could have charged me twice this. I could have, I agreed, but then I'd have to look at my own reflection every morning, and I've got enough problems with that as it is. She laughed again, that same genuine dueling bell sound that had caught my attention the day before. Well, let me at least buy you lunch. You don't owe me anything, Cynda. I know, she said simply, but I'd like to anyway. This time we went to Murphy's Black Hole Bar. Murphy himself was working the bar, a mountain of a kunari with 2 primary limbs like tree trunks and a philosophy degree from Interstellar University that he'd never used for anything except winning bar arguments. Marcus, he boomed as we entered. And who's this lovely entity? Cynda, meet Murphy. Murphy, don't embarrass me. Wouldn't dream of it, Murphy said with a grin that suggested exactly the opposite. Cynda, you should know this human once fixed my delivery truck with nothing but nanotape and Terran determination. That sounds about right, Cynda said, sliding onto a maglev bar stool. We ordered protein burgers and talked about everything except the important stuff. Her past, my divorce, the careful way she avoided mentioning anyone significant in her life. Instead, we discussed data libraries, shared funny customer stories, debated the Green Bay Star Devils' chances this season. After our lunch, she insisted on seeing my apartment upstairs. I protested half-heartedly, aware that my living situation wasn't exactly impressive. 1 bedroom, an integrated kitchenette, a bathroom small enough to shave while sitting on the anti-grav commode. It's functional, I said as she looked around. It's perfect for you, she replied, running a limb along my small digital bookshelf. No unnecessary clutter. Everything serves a purpose, like you. That observation struck me as oddly intimate, the kind of insight that suggested she'd been paying closer attention than I'd realized. We sat on my couch, a synth leather relic that had survived 2 stellar cycles and 1 divorce, drinking synth coffee and watching the afternoon light shift across the walls. The conversation had grown quieter, more personal. Can I ask you something? She said suddenly. Shoot. Do you ever get lonely living like this? I mean, I considered the question seriously. Sometimes, but lonely is better than being with the wrong entity. I learned that lesson the expensive way. She nodded with her upper limbs, staring into her coffee cup. I know exactly what you mean. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried weight, like we were both remembering things we'd rather forget. When she left that afternoon, I found myself hoping I'd see her again soon. Not just as a customer, but as whatever we were becoming. I didn't have to wait long. 3 stellar cycles later, Cynda called the shop. Her hydroglass faucet was dripping, she said, and she'd heard I was handy with more than just spacecraft. Would I mind taking a look? I arrived at her domicile that evening with a multi-tool kit and a 6-pack of Xylar Ale. The place was exactly what I'd expected. A Zalosian bungalow with a wraparound porch, a well-maintained bio garden, and the kind of attention to detail that suggested a being who took pride in their home. The hydroglass faucet was indeed dripping, but it was a simple pressure seal replacement, 10 minutes tops. As I worked, Cynda moved around the kitchen preparing a meal, and I caught myself watching her efficient movements, the way she seemed to anticipate exactly what nutrient paste or utensil she needed next. You prepare food often? I asked, tightening the final fitting. Every evening, she said. It's therapeutic. Plus, I hate eating alone in restaurant modules. What about eating alone at home? She paused, food tester halfway to her sensor. That's different. Home's supposed to be where you can be yourself. I finished with the faucet and tested it. No drips, good pressure. All set. Stay for the meal? She asked. It came out casual, but I caught the underlying note of hope. If you're sure I won't be imposing. Marcus, you just saved me 100 credits in plumber fees. The least I can do is feed you. Over resequenced chicken marsala and synth grain rice, the conversation took a turn toward the personal. Cynda told me about her collective, her elders retired on the Corvus Reef, her sister in the Epsilon Quadrant, with 2 hybrid young. She'd moved to Delos Prime for a job at the data library, loved the small outpost feel after growing up on the central Kepler station. What she didn't mention was the crystalline wristband she'd started wearing on her secondary right limb instead of her primary left, or the holographic image on the desk that she deactivated. I didn't mention that I'd noticed both details. After our meal, we sat on her porch with Xylar Ales, watching the human and xenon neighbors walk their pet bots and prune their biovegetation. The evening had that perfect temperature where you don't notice the air around you, just exist comfortably in it. Marcus, Cynda said suddenly, can I ask you something personal? Depends how personal, she smiled. Do you think individuals get second chances? I mean, really get them, not just pretend they do. The question caught me off guard. I think individuals make their own second chances, but they have to be willing to take them when they come. She was quiet for a long moment, picking at the label on her Xylar Ale bottle. I used to be bonded, she said finally. Davos. He transitioned to energy 3 stellar cycles ago. A biocore malfunction at 41. There it was. The story behind the careful way her species held itself. The practiced independence. The domicile that felt like it was waiting for someone to return. I'm sorry, I said, because what else do you say? Everyone always says that, like it was somehow their fault. She took a long pull from her Xylar Ale. The thing is, I don't want to be the bereaved entity anymore. I'm tired of being defined by something that happened to me instead of something I chose. I understood then why she'd invited me for a meal, why she called when her hydroglass faucet dripped. Not because she couldn't handle these things herself, but because she was tired of handling everything alone. For what it's worth, I said, I don't see you as a bereaved entity. I see you as someone who makes excellent synth coffee and asks good questions about subatomic particle resonators. That earned me a smile, a real one, not the polite version she'd been practicing for 3 stellar cycles. "Thank you," she said, "for all of it." When I left that night, Cynda walked me to my utility rover. As I climbed in, she rested a limb on the doorframe. "Marcus, would it be completely inappropriate if I asked you to come back tomorrow? I think my waste resequencer is making weird noises." I grinned. "Completely inappropriate. But I'll be here anyway." The next evening, the waste resequencer was fine. We both knew it, but we went through the motions of me examining it while she pretended to be concerned about potential mechanical failures. "Seems to be running perfectly," I announced after my thorough inspection. "Well, that's disappointing," Cynda said with mock seriousness. I was looking forward to another domestic tech emergency. "You know," I said, closing the resequencer access panel, "if you want me to come over, you could just ask. No need to invent mechanical problems." She blushed, actually blushed with a faint jade glow like I'd caught her in some elaborate scheme. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been making excuses to see you too." The admission hung between us for a moment, honest and uncomplicated. Then Cynda stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her unique Zelosian scent and count the tiny iridescent flecks in her swirling nebula eyes. "I haven't done this in a while," she said quietly. "Done what?" "Wanted someone to stay." I reached up and tucked a loose strand of bioluminescent hair behind her ear, a gesture that seemed to surprise us both with its tenderness. "I haven't wanted to stay anywhere in a while," I admitted. She kissed me then, gentle and questioning, like she was asking permission for something we both already knew was going to happen. I kissed her back, answering yes to questions she hadn't asked yet. When we broke apart, she rested her cranial plating against mine. "I should probably mention," she whispered, "I make the galaxy's best energy pancakes." "I should probably mention," I whispered back. "I was hoping you'd say that." The stellar cycles that followed fell into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Cynda would call with some domestic crisis, a squeaky pneumatic door, a running bio-toilet, an air recirculator that wobbled. I'd arrive with tools and stories from the shop. She'd feed me meals and share tales from the data library's more colorful patrons. It was during one of these evenings in late November that things shifted again. I just finished adjusting her grav door hinges when she appeared beside me, holding 2 steaming mugs. "Hot synth chocolate," she said, "with real whipped cream." We settled on her porch swing. The November air, crisp enough to make the hot drinks feel like small miracles, was made comfortable by a personal climate field. Cynda had draped a thick bio-wool blanket over both our laps, and I found myself hyper-aware of where her limb pressed against mine. "Marcus," she said after a while, "can I teach you something?" "Depends. Is it going to bruise my Terran ego?" She laughed. "Maybe." "Come on." She led me inside to her common room, where digital bookshelves lined every wall from floor to ceiling. The room smelled like aged synth paper and synthetic lavender, with soft space jazz playing from invisible speakers. "This," she said, pulling a worn digital reader from a shelf, "is my favorite book." She handed me a copy of Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. The virtual spine was cracked, the pages soft with repeated reading. "I've probably read this 20 times," she continued, "but I've never read it aloud to anyone." I looked at the reader, then at her. "You want to read to me? Would that be completely boring?" "Try me." We settled back on the couch, Cynda curled against my side with the reader open in her lap. Her voice as she read was different than her everyday speaking voice. More resonant, richer, like she was channeling something deeper. "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again. I'd never been much for books, always preferred fixing things with my hands to getting lost in someone else's imagination. But listening to Cynda read, feeling the vibration of her voice against my chest, watching her face change as she became different characters, it was hypnotic." She read for nearly an hour before setting the reader aside and looking up at me. "Verdict?" "I think," I said carefully, "I might have been missing out on something." Her smile was brilliant. "Really?" "Really. But only if you're the one reading." She kissed me then, soft and sweet, and I thought about how this being was teaching me to see the universe through different eyes, not just books, but everything. The way afternoon light fell through ionized windows, how resequenced food could be art when someone cared enough to make it special, That conversation could be as satisfying as solving a quantum paradox. December brought Zelos Prime's first real energy snow, and with it an unexpected crisis. Cynda called me at the shop on a Thursday afternoon, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Marcus, I hate to bother you, but my climate control system isn't working. The domicile is freezing." "On my way," I said, already reaching for my environmental suit. I found her bundled in thermal weave and insulation blankets, her breath visible in the cold air of her common room. The atmospheric processor was old, probably installed when the domicile was built, and after 20 minutes of examination, I found the problem. The plasma energy exchange unit had cracked, a dangerous situation that meant the whole unit needed to be replaced. "How long?" she asked, hugging herself for warmth. "A few stellar cycles to get the part, another cycle to install. This weekend at the earliest." She nodded with her upper limbs, trying to hide her dismay. Off-world hotels during tourist season weren't cheap, and I could see her mentally calculating costs. "You'll stay with me," I said. It wasn't a question. "Marcus, I can't." "Sure you can. My place has climate control, a decent grav bed, and I make passable synth coffee. Besides," I added with a grin, "I'm pretty sure my couch is more comfortable than Murphy's guest quarter." That first night, she slept on my couch, despite my protest that she should take the bed. I woke around midnight to find her shivering under the thin blanket I'd provided. "Cynda?" I shook her gently awake. "You're freezing." "I'm fine," she mumbled, clearly not fine at all. "Come on." I helped her up, led her to my bedroom. "Take the bed, I'll sleep on the couch." "Don't be ridiculous." She was more awake now, her swirling eyes serious in the dim light from the hallway. "The bed's big enough for both of us. We're adults." She was right, of course, but as I lay beside her that first night, careful to stay on my side of the mattress, I was acutely aware of every breath she took, every small movement she made. It was both torture and the most content I'd felt in stellar cycles. The next morning, I woke to the smell of resequenced bacon and synth coffee. Cynda stood at my synth stove, wearing one of my old flannel shirts over her flight suit, humming softly to herself. Her hair was messy from sleep, and she looked so perfectly at home in my kitchenette that something inside my chest squeezed tight. "Morning," she said, turning to smile at me. "Hope you don't mind. I raided your nutrient dispenser." "Not at all." I moved to pour myself coffee, deliberately brushing against her as I reached for a mug. She didn't step away. "Your atmospheric processor should be here tomorrow," I said. "I'll install it Sunday, okay?" She was quiet for a moment, flipping resequenced bacon with more attention than the task required. "Marcus?" "Yeah?" "What if we didn't rush to fix it?" I set down my coffee cup. "What do you mean?" She turned to face me fully, a slight jade blush coloring her cheeks. "I mean, what if I stayed here a few more stellar cycles? Just to make sure everything's working properly?" "Just to make sure," I repeated, fighting a smile. "Exactly, for safety reasons. Can't be too careful." She stepped closer, sliding her primary limbs around my waist. "So you wouldn't mind the company?" "I think," I said, pulling her closer, "I could probably tolerate it." She stayed a week, then another. Before either of us acknowledged it, her sonic toothbrush had found a home next to mine in the bathroom cabinet. Her digital readers had migrated to my nightstand, and my morning routine had expanded to include making synth coffee for two. The Stargazer Festival was especially magical that year. Cynda insisted on getting a real optical tree, something I hadn't bothered with in stellar cycles. We spent an entire Saturday morning at the luminescent tree farm, debating the merits of various glowing evergreens while energy snow fell gently around us. "This one," she announced, stopping in front of a perfectly symmetrical light fir. "It's twice as tall as my ceiling. We'll make it work." And we did. I trimmed 2 feet off the bottom while Cynda dug through boxes of holographic ornaments she'd retrieved from her domicile. Each decoration had a story. The crystalline angel her elder had carved, the shimmering snowflake hologram from her first habitat module, the silly glowing reindeer Davos had acquired during their last Stargazer festival together. I watched her hang that final ornament carefully, her face softening with memory. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded with her upper limbs, stepping back to survey our handiwork. "Yeah, it feels right having them here. Like past and present can coexist." That evening we sat in the dark common room with only the optical tree lights glowing, drinking starfruit wine and listening to old cosmic carols. Cynda was curled against my side, tracing patterns on my chest with a limb. Marcus? Yeah? I love this. Being here with you. Creating new traditions. It feels like coming alive again. I tightened my arms around her. I love it too. She lifted her cranial plating to look at me. Do you think Davos would approve? The question surprised me with its vulnerability. I considered it seriously, thinking about the entity and the holographic images she'd shown me. Kind eyes, in easy resonance, the way he'd clearly adored her. I think, I said carefully, that any being who loved you would want you to be happy. And I think he'd approve of someone who treats you like you deserve to be treated. Her nebula eyes filled with a faint liquid, but she smiled. You always know the right thing to say. Not always. But I saw her. She kissed me then, soft and grateful, and I marveled again at how this alien being had changed everything. My perspective, my priorities, my definition of home. In March, Cynda asked me to visit her at the data library. There's something I want to show you, she said over a resequenced breakfast, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Plus, I think it's time you met my other world. The Xylos Prime Public Data Library was a beautiful old Carnegie model building, all high ceilings and tall electro-optical windows that filled the space with golden afternoon light. Cynda led me through the main reading room, past Xenons hunched over digital news feeds and students surrounded by data slates, to a smaller room in the back. This is the local history archive, she explained, unlocking a plasma-shielded door with her biokey. It's my special project. Inside, the room was lined with digital filing cabinets, old holographic photographs, and box after box of quantum data cubes. Cynda moved through the space with obvious pride, pulling out digital folders and synth leather-bound volumes. Look at this, she said, opening a thick hollow album. Holographic photographs of Xylos Prime from the first colonization cycles through the 2460s. In this, she gestured to a holographic wall map covered in colored pins. This shows where every significant structure in the original settlement district used to be. I studied the map, then noticed something that made me smile. Reed's Automotive hub is marked here. I know. Well, I've been researching it. She pulled out a digital file folder. Your Terran grandfather opened the garage in cycle 2352. Before that, the structure was an etheric repair shop run by a Xenon named Henryk Kowalski, probably related to the Regen Eatery owner next door. She showed me old holographic photographs of the building, e-paper clippings about my grandfather's business, even his original business license application. I felt something tighten in my chest as I looked at pictures of a younger version of my father working alongside his own dad. Why did you do all this? I asked. Cynda closed the digital folder carefully. Because it's your history. Because the beings we love should know where they come from. Just then, a Xenon appeared in the doorway, tall, silver-skinned, wearing a stern expression that immediately reminded me of my Terran high school principal. Cynda, you know archives aren't supposed to be used for personal. The Xenon stopped when she saw me. Oh, I didn't realize you had a visitor? Miss Patterson, this is Marcus Reed. Marcus, this is my supervisor, Margaret Patterson. The Xenon's expression shifted slightly, recognition flickering in her tri-lobed eyes. Reed, as in Reed's Automotive hub? Yes, sir. Your father repaired my repulsor car for 20 cycles. Honest human, fair prices. She looked between Cynda and me, clearly assessing our relationship. Cynda, I need to speak with you about the budget meeting next cycle. After Ms. Patterson left, Cynda sighed. She's not happy about the archive project. Says it's not a priority, that we should focus on interstellar digital resources instead. What does that mean? It means she wants to box everything up, put it in off-world storage, maybe transfer some of it to the Cosmic Historical Society, but probably not. Cynda's voice was carefully neutral, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She thinks that local history is old-fashioned. That evening, I found myself thinking about those holographic photographs, about my Terran grandfather's calloused hands in that old picture, about Cynda's passion for preserving stories that would otherwise be lost. The next week, I showed up at the data library on a Saturday morning with my multi-tool kit and a plan. Cynda met me at the employee entrance, looking confused. Marcus, what are you doing here? I'm here to fix something. I gestured toward the archive room. You said Ms. Patterson thinks the archive isn't modern enough. Let's make it modern. Over the next stellar cycle, we spent every Saturday morning upgrading the archive room. I installed better energy lighting, built custom synth material shelving units that maximize space, and set up a small work area with a spectrum scanner and a quantum computer. Cynda organized everything with the efficiency of a being who'd been dreaming of this project for cycles. The transformation was remarkable. What had been a cramped storage room became a proper research center, professional and inviting. More importantly, other staff members started stopping by, asking about the holographic photographs, sharing their own family stories. You know, Cynda said one Saturday as we admired our handiwork, I think Ms. Patterson is coming around. She actually asked me to prepare a presentation about the archive for the board meeting next cycle. Think she'll approve the funding to keep it going? I think, Cynda said, slipping her limb around my waist, she'll have a hard time saying no to something that's already proven successful. She was right. Not only did the board approve continued funding for the archive, they allocated money for Cynda to expand the project planet-wide. Within 3 stellar cycles, she was leading workshops on family xenology and local history research. Watching her present to a room full of engaged community members, I realized something. Cynda hadn't just been preserving other beings' histories in that archive room. She'd been creating space for new stories to begin, including ours. When she introduced me to the crowd as the human who helped make all this possible, I felt a pride that had nothing to do with the shelves I'd built or the lights I'd installed. It was the pride of being part of something larger than myself, of building something meaningful with someone I loved. After the presentation, as we cleaned up the room together, Cynda paused in collecting data slates. Marcus, can I tell you something? Always, The day I started researching your family's garage, it wasn't really about the archive. It was because I wanted to understand where you came from, what shaped you. She looked up at me. I wanted to know your story so I could see how mine might fit with it. I pulled her close, kissing her cranial plating. And what did you decide? I decided, she said softly, that some stories are better when they become one story. The new biogrowth cycle brought new challenges and deeper commitments. Cynda's domicile lease was up in May, and we found ourselves having conversations about the future with increasing frequency. I could renew for another cycle, she said one evening as we walked through the eco-park near her domicile. You could, or... She stopped walking, turned to face me. Or I could officially move in with you. Not just because my atmospheric processor broke or my lease is up, but because I want to build a life with you. My heart hammered against my ribs. Is that what you want? It's what I've wanted for stellar cycles. I just wasn't sure if you felt the same way. I cupped her face in my hands, looked directly into those swirling nebula eyes that had captivated me from the beginning. Cynda, the day your cruiser broke down was the luckiest day of my life. I can't imagine going back to the way things were before you. So yes, I want you to move in. I want your digital readers on my shelves and your synth-coffee mug in my sink and your terrible taste in simulated hollows cluttering up my HoloNet queue. She laughed, fluid tracing down her cheeks. My taste in hollows is not terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And I love it. One stellar cycle after our first meeting, on a Tuesday evening in October, I was closing up the shop when Cynda walked in, carrying a floating picnic basket and wearing a jumpsuit I'd never seen before. Going somewhere special? I asked, wiping my hands clean on a rag. We are. Change of plans. You're not cooking tonight. Oh, really? And what makes you think I'm available for mysterious dinner dates? She walked up to me, straightened my collar with the practiced familiarity of someone who'd been doing it for cycles. Because I called Murphy and he said, you've been moping around all day, checking your comms unit every 5 cron cycles. I don't mope. You absolutely mope. It's actually quite endearing. She led me to her cruiser, the same white-silver vehicle I'd fixed that first day, now running smoothly with regular maintenance and my careful attention. We drove to the liquid methane lake, where she'd set up a thermal blanket and bioluminescent lanterns on a small bluff overlooking the water. What's the occasion? I asked as we settled onto the blanket. Does there need to be one? She unpacked the basket, protein sandwiches, synth fruit, a bottle of starfruit wine, energy chocolate chip cookies that I knew she'd made from scratch because her species would never buy store-bought when home replicated was an option. We ate and talked and watched the Tenebrian sunset over Xylos Prime, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that made the whole world look like an interstellar postcard. As darkness settled around us, Cynda moved closer, leaning her cranial plating against my shoulder. Marcus, yeah? I have something for you. She reached into the pocket of her jumpsuit and pulled out a small wrapped box. My stomach jumped. It was too small to be anything but personal tech, too carefully wrapped to be casual. It's not what you think, she said quickly, seeing my expression. Open it. Inside was a key, simple alloy, newly cut. It's to my domicile, she said. I know we've been living together in your apartment, but my domicile has that workshop space in the basement you've been wanting, and the biogarden you pretend not to care about, but I've seen you looking at. I turned the key over in my palm, feeling its weight. I'm not asking you to give up your apartment or make any big decisions tonight, she continued, echoing words she'd spoken stellar cycles ago in a different context. I'm just saying that if you want a home that's truly ours, not just yours with my stuff in it, then maybe we could make that happen. I looked up at her face, illuminated by the soft glow of our lanterns. And what about Davos? Davos will always be part of my story, she said simply. But he doesn't get to write the ending. We do. I leaned forward and kissed her, tasting starfruit wine and possibility and the promise of a future we'd build together. Yes, I said against her lips. Yes to the domicile. Yes to the workshop. Yes to pretending I don't care about your biogarden while secretly learning the names of all your alien flora. She laughed, pulling back to look at me. Really? Really? On one condition. What's that? We keep the apartment too, for backup. And because Murphy would never forgive me if I moved out completely. Deal. We packed up the picnic and drove back to her domicile, our domicile, in comfortable silence. As I unlocked the front door with my new key, Cynda slipped a limb into my hand. Welcome home, she said softly. I've been home for stellar cycles, I replied. I just didn't have the key to prove it. Some individuals believe in destiny, others in luck. I believe in second chances, and fried ignition relays, and the willingness to stop your utility rover for a stranger in distress. Mostly I believe that sometimes the most important fixing you can do isn't on ion engines or hydroglass faucets or atmospheric processors. It's on hearts that have learned to trust again, lives that have found new purpose in love that proves itself stronger than loss. Cynda taught me that home isn't a place you inherit or rent or buy. It's something you build day by day, choice by careful choice, with a being who sees you clearly and loves you anyway. And that, I've learned, is the most honest work of all.